I'm Peter Green. I'm a PhD candidate at Curtin University, and I'm recording this presentation in Perth, Western Australia, and I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the custodians and treasures on the land on which I live and work. In this presentation, I will talk about my PhD research on understanding the visualization needs of researchers using email archives, and why I'm taking this particular approach, and what I hope to contribute to the archival community. I don't need to go into too much background for this audience, but let me set the scene briefly. While I do that, you can look at this early morning photograph of my neighbour's front yard with the large kangaroos that are regular visitors and eat our roses. Correspondence is an important resource for research. The letters sent and received by individuals provide valuable insights into people and events. Scholars of literature depend upon the paper trail of correspondence and drafts left by writers for their research. Historians use personal correspondence to understand the past. Researchers mine archives for correspondence that reveal personal details of events and motivation, and to hear the intimate voice of a person expressed in their correspondence. Correspondence is acquired and preserved by cultural institutions for this very purpose. Now, correspondence as a thing has transitioned from paper to the born digital format of email. Not exclusively. There are other born digital forms of communication that are widespread and have the same characteristics of correspondence, but these are not the focus of my research. So it is recognised that there is an existential challenge for cultural institutions in dealing with the change to born digital if the historical record is to be maintained. I don't need to spell out the challenges at every stage of working with email, not in this symposium. But let us assume that we will overcome the challenges of acquisition and preservation and find ways to overcome the barriers to access of privacy, copyright, and technical issues. Let us assume that in the future, our collections will contain a rich, accessible resource of personal correspondence in the form of email archives. So in this anticipated future, the born digital nature of email provides an opportunity to apply new tools for working with correspondence. One of these tools is visualization, which is my area of interest. Visualization is a very broad term used for graphical representations of data or concepts. Here is a simple example of a visualization. It's a word cloud generated using the text of my candidacy proposal. It gives you something that you can grasp at a glance. Here is an example produced by the EPAD software from the Robert Creeley email archive at Stanford. And here's another EPAD example, in this case from the Ted Nelson email archive. These visualizations provide an overview of the email archive, a sense of the activity over time, and an insight into the top correspondence. And you can see at a glance differences between these two email archives. It is a very useful tool in the context of the other functionality provided by EPAD, and a good illustration of the value of visualization. Here is a very different example of visualization from Project Muse, showing the sentiment of emails using data analysis and a generated lexicon of 20 categories with terms covering various emotions, family, health, life events, expletives, etc. This visualization allows the researcher to explore the email archive using more of the semantic content of the email. And the last example of visualization is this network graph from the Carcanet Press email preservation project, showing connections between correspondence. This type of network graph shows how correspondence form clusters, the different volume of correspondence, and the direction of correspondence. Network graphs are a very popular way of visualizing an email archive and come in many, many flavors. A recent review of the literature by Bartlett and others found 39 papers describing 69 visualizations applied to email archives over a 20-year period. So visualization of email archives is happening, but it is a developing area, not yet matured. The EPAD examples of visualizations made available for research are more the exception than the rule. I expect this to change when more and more collections contain a rich, accessible resource of email archives. However, producing visualization is challenging and time-consuming. How do you know what to visualize? Let me talk for a moment about those who are the users of collections of personal archives. These are the historians, sociologists, information scientists, literary scholars, political scientists, etc. These researchers would be the consumers of visualization of email archives. However, very little research has been conducted to discover their visualization needs when working with email archives. So the objective of my research is to investigate the needs of researchers who will be working with email correspondence in archival collections and use what I find to help guide the creation of visualizations. Let me emphasize that my research is to discover their needs. It's not about producing visualizations. It's about discovering what needs to be visualized to meet their needs. Visualization is not an end in itself, but a tool for meeting the needs of users of the collection. Knowing what those needs are will provide a solid platform on which visualization can be built. So the researchers that I'll be using as the cohort for my study will be drawn from a diversity of disciplines such as history, anthropology, literary studies, information science, social policy. These experienced researchers will have had significant engagement with the collections of cultural institutions and with the staff managing those collections. Those staff will be able to identify researchers for this project and negotiate my access to them. This approach to identifying experienced researchers has been successfully used by others. The researchers will also have a track record of published research outputs, biographies, histories, academic papers, and so forth. I will invite them to be interviewed. The interviews will be recorded and transcribed, and the transcripts will be the research data on which I do my analysis. I expect to do about 20 interviews. In the interview, I will explore how they have conducted their research, especially with using correspondence in the collections, what has helped them in their research, and what might best meet their needs when working with email archives in cultural institutions. One of the challenges with this project is that the most experienced researchers, those who have some decades of experience, will likely not have had the opportunity to examine correspondence in the form of email archives. This is just because the collection and use of email archives is not widespread, and they have often worked with the archives of people who didn't use email and whose correspondence was on paper and captured as such. However, these are the researchers who know what they want when they are digging into the archival record, and I will be helping them in the interviews to bring their experience to bear on the future access to correspondence in the form of email and to the potential of visualisation. This is a bit tricky. However, they will know all about correspondence and they will know from their own experience about email, so I don't think the leap is too great. It is that gap between the past and future on which I'm focused and which I hope to draw from these interviews. And if I draw out what is most important to them, then I can fill the gap in how visualisation might help. So to restate, the target group I'm looking for will probably not contain researchers who understand visualisation and have used email archives, though I'd be happy to include them if I find them, but will include experienced researchers who have a deep understanding of their own needs and can bring that to bear on email archives and visualisation. I expect to be doing my interviews over the next 6 to 12 months. Research outcomes will follow. The PhD journey is a long one. Do you have questions or suggestions or comments? I'd be very happy to hear them. Would you like to chat? Very happy to do that. I'm very good at juggling different time zones. I have a few minutes left, so I'd like to mention some other things that I'm interested in, but are outside the scope of my thesis. My study is on personal email archives, but there are lots of interesting challenges of a similar nature for email archives that are government and corporate records, and for other sorts of email archives such as mailing lists. I'm interested in the rapid advance of various things under the umbrella of artificial intelligence and how they will impact on email archives and on visualisation of those archives. I'm following with interest the work of the Lustre project in the UK. I'm interested in how we make progress on various fronts when it's nearly impossible to obtain an email archive for visualisation development work or training machine learning models and so forth. An email archive that is real has so many constraints on its use. This is an impediment and a challenge for progress in this area. Lastly, I'm interested in developing a register of personal email archives in collections. My experience has been that they are often dark and might remain so for some time. But knowing who has what, even if they are not easily available, would be very useful development work in this area. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I look forward to sharing my outcomes with you in the future and for engaging with you in the meantime.